Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Enlighten the Youth, episode 9. It's been a month and a half since I got an episode up, but I got busy with some things. But now we got a new setup. We got some actual mics here and some more lights, and hopefully the video quality is looking good and the audio quality is even better. Today, we bring our special guest, Roman, uh, also hosted by Roman. You could go ahead and introduce yourself and just give a brief introduction to who you are.
So my name is Roman, originally from Ukraine. I've been living in Edmonton for the last 12 years. What I do right now is I'm focused on building a web app. It's called Career Hound. It helps people find hidden jobs on the internet that are less competitive. But I've worked on various projects in the past, charitable, for-profit, non-profit, different ones. And I like to think of myself as a guy that gets shit done.
I would definitely say that, yeah. One thing that I really appreciate about you, or admire about you, is your ability to. What I see from an outsider perspective is stay balanced in life,
Mm.
because you are able to get shit done, but I feel like you're also a very laid back guy. Like I never see you really stressing, which is
Uh,
interesting, knowing how much you get done.
hmm
So why don't we start off with that as the first topic? Uh, what are some tips that you got on being balanced in life while also getting shit done? How do you do both?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I mean, there's like the little things you can do to reduce stress and increase productivity.
Mm.
So I'll walk you through that to start with. So for me, for example, for years, I have planned out my day ahead of time. So the day before, like I want to wake up not having to make any decisions. I want to wake up and just live my day, do my work. So the day before, I'll always pick my, if I have to leave my house, I'll always pick my outfit the day before,
Not that.
right? If I have to leave my house and, I'll prepare lunch, like it's an obvious one, a little one.
Mm-hmm.
I will plan out my tasks for the day um, ahead of time, and I will structure it. Not like it's not super structured. So like another thing is you don't want to get too structured. When you get too structured, you start to get burnt out. Like you start to dislike what you do. So you want to like leave some flexibility. But I'll plan out my day ahead of time. So when I wake up, I already know what to wear. I have my food prepared. Why food? Because let's say if you don't have your food planned the day before, if you get hungry throughout the day, and that can actually make you more stressed. It can make you anxious. It's little things that can make a big difference. And then planning my day, I don't have to like use any mental energy on thinking. I can just execute. Saves, it makes my day a lot smoother this way.
Mm-hmm.
That is a big one. That's like what I do on a daily basis. On a weekly basis, every Sunday, I go through a list of things to review to plan out, to review what happened in the previous week and plan for the week ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So what does this mean? And it's done on different levels. For example, there's principles. For example, let's say you want to get rid of some habit, maybe in how you work. For example, some people they get too distracted, and the reason they get too distracted is because while they have a plan for the day, they start to execute on items that are brand new that pop up as they work. And what happens is you start executing new items that you didn't decide earlier are a priority. So now you're not actually meeting your actual priorities, and you're working on like random stuff that might not even have any value. So it's like, for example, if I notice something like that in my day, I will go back on Sunday. I'll actually like make that a principle for the following week.
Oh.
So not to focus only on priority tasks, like little things like that, and I can like go on.
Yeah, that's very interesting. One thing that I want to understand though is how you say you don't want to keep it too structured, but then you're also saying like the way you're describing it sounds very structured. Like you're planning your day out beforehand and you're figuring out your meals and your outfits. Like that sounds very structured, but then you're saying to keep it, or you want to leave some room to breathe, right? So how, like, what does that mean to you?
So one is I don't like plan out exact order of every task.
Mm-hmm.
I have bundles. For example, let's say if you're working on two different projects, you either want to have you want to have blocks in the day to work on those projects if you're working two at once that day, versus and then so within those batches of tasks, you just kind of like decide as you go which one to do. That's what I mean, is not having a specific order for everything, just having like bunches of tasks and go from there, and do as you feel. But also, I the thing about it too, like you did say, like it is pretty structured, but within a week, I'll have days when I'll sort of free flow. I actually want my mind to run freely for at least a day, where I don't follow a specific plan. That's a part of it. Saturdays usually are those days for me, or Fridays, but Monday's got to be quite structured to start the week strong.
Yeah. What type of what do you do on Sundays when you're recapping everything that has happened in the past week? Are you just finding moments that you started working on a task that maybe wasn't beneficial to you at that time, or what are you reviewing specifically on Sundays?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'll just pull out my phone to give you that answer. I've had a system around my life, for years, since I was 17 in university. I felt overwhelmed, so I felt like I had to design it. So it's become quite sophisticated. But
I'm excited to see this.
Yeah, so I'm gonna give you a quick overview. So I have a note that breaks down what I gotta do. So first is finances. You want to make sure that your financial health is in check. So what I do is I have an Excel sheet where I organize like what I'm spending my money on into categories, and once I fill in the Excel sheet that week, I can see if I wasted my money. It's like things that shouldn't be part of my life. For example, I rarely drink, so if I ever see a spike in spending money on alcohol, I start asking myself, what caused me to have the spike? Is it outside influence? Did somebody new come into my life that has influenced me to make these decisions and spend more money on alcohol, or is it something internal? And so first is I look at my transactions. I can start to notice patterns there and start to question myself there. The second thing I do, so the way I take notes on ideas and things to work on, is by taking screenshots and obviously emails, right? So every Sunday I'll go through all my emails and all my photos, and I'll delete a bunch that don't matter anymore, but the ones that matter, I put my favorites, and then I'll start to turn them into tasks. For example, there's an article I wrote this. There's an interesting article, The Intelligence Age, that just came out recently. I just read it today, but last week I took a screenshot of it.
Yeah.
And this way, I'm not missing out on ideas that come up or resources that come up that could be useful. I'm always check. I go through it. I get it done. The next thing is I have this note pack that's called Decisions, and there's personal life decisions I've made, and principles, standards, business life, health. I've decided what kind of foods I should have every week. You want to have fermented foods because they're good for digestion. So I make sure that that is in my principle note for health. For example, for lifestyle, right? Let's see, what's one of my principles? So I got, don't sweat the small stuff. No, it's I have to write this down because it's natural for us humans to get stuck on little things, on negativities. So for me, by having my note pack here and reviewing it on a weekly basis for 4 times a month, sometimes 5, tens of times a year, it starts to get ingrained in here, and it starts to convert from a written statement into a way of living that is natural to you. So I now have noticed that by writing these principles down, I've become I've started to sweat little things less frequently. I move on faster, or release the venom. Sometimes you get into a conflict with someone, or something comes up that fills your body up with venom. Your your nervous system starts to get all out of control, And for me, it's like it's finding ways to release it versus getting stuck in it. So little things like that. So I will review these principles that I wrote that I have in my notepad every Sunday, and I will mark the ones that I have not followed in red.
Mm.
Then I copy and paste that into another note
Yeah.
that I journal on at the
Oh
end of that
wow.
day.
Yeah.
So now, and when I journal on it, I start to dissect like, why did this happen? What does this mean? What's the game plan? Why is this important? Maybe it's not important. Maybe I should take it off my principal list. It's not applicable to me anymore.
Mm.
So I start my week now having that like processed,
Mm-hmm.
like these the wins and losses I've had, and then a few more just briefly here. Then I have like my projects note, where I have my little projects. And when I say projects, it doesn't have to be a business project. It could be as simple as it could be working out for someone,
Mm-hmm.
right? It could be like for me, one of my projects right now is like my home. Like I have to get blinds
Mm-hmm.
for my windows,
Mm-hmm.
and like that's a project.
Yeah.
It takes mental energy to go out and buy the blinds, pick the right ones that fit this custom, like this weird window that I have.
Yeah.
So so I review that, and the last one is as I go through my main note to plan my week task for the next week.
Mm-hmm.
All the little things that came up each day,
Mm-hmm.
instead of executing them with the day of, they go into my Sunday note, and on Sunday I will plan out for next week.
Mm.
And they
So do you essentially put together a group of tasks that you then allocate based on each day throughout the week? So like Sunday you group up all the tasks that you need to do for the following week, and then when the day comes you kind of batch them up accordingly.
on Sunday I actually pre-batch them for like these ones are like Mondays, Wednesday, Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
Something else I do is like super helpful for me is I've established my priorities.
Yeah.
For example, for me, there's finances, there is health,
Mm-hmm.
there's the relationships, and so forth. And so my tasks are organized under these categories,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like they're sitting there. And why do I do this? I actually do it because I want my brain to look and get the validation that I'm on the right path.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm crossing off things under my priorities. And my last step for Sunday is I will go through my priority list, which is a separate note where I establish my priorities and why certain things are important to me, and I will match my tasks to my priorities. I do like mental checks. I don't actually write anything, but I look at my priorities and I'm like, okay, do I have any tasks for next week that are going to move me closer in this direction for this thing?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, okay, looks like next week I'm moving the needle in all priorities.
Mm-hmm.
And here's why it's so important. Part of the reason I do this is not to plan for productivity,
Mm-hmm.
but to plan to reduce my stress.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have all like this visual system, I know exactly how much I'm moving the needle. Like I know if I'm moving the needle.
Mm-hmm.
My brain can't tell me, hey, like you're not doing great enough. Like a lot of people have this negative self-talk.
Yeah.
I do as well. And I've reduced mine by having tangible proof
Mm-hmm.
that I'm making changes and progress.
Yeah, I seen a quote that said confidence is just repeated proof of something. So if you can repeatedly prove that you're able to achieve something, then you grow confidence in that skill. I guess you just grown the confidence in balancing your life in an efficient way where you could be stress free. And that you actually so I have two questions. You answered one of them already, about the stress. But do you find that planning or doing the Sunday plans, what ways does it ease your stress throughout the week? Is it just knowing which tasks you have to complete? Or is it does it ease your stress through, like what you said, the proof, the evidence that you are moving in the right direction?
I'd say a big one is if you mix execution with thinking, you end up losing a lot of energy that could be used for execution.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're having to plan your day and actively think about it each day, you now reduce your execution by like a decent percentage, versus when you wake up you just go at it, because what is a good example? It's yeah, like planning and execute competes for the same resources. You might as well just like stack it separately. That's kind of what I found. There's just there's just two different types of work. Both use mental resources. That's the main reason I do it. But I mean, the other thing is this way I get to ensure. Okay, here's why. It takes time. So like the planning I do on Sunday genuinely takes time. It doesn't take like 20 minutes. Like usually takes like 3-4 hours, right? Like it takes time. So if I were to, and it takes 3-4 hours, but if I were doing it on a daily basis, it would take even longer. Um, which one?
Right, yeah, we're recording.
That's good. Come in.
Which one? That's hilarious. But yeah, continue.
Yes, to be honest, it's both. It's both. But I just found that it's better to keep planning away from executing.
And then the second question. So all of this, or this Sunday recap that you've put together, was that achieved purely through your own trials and tribulations of just trying to create a more efficient cycle each week that you can constantly improve yourself and that allows you to be stress-free? Was that entirely created by yourself?
It's a mix. You often hear people talking about how your Sunday should be dedicated to your blueprint. I think that life is so dynamic these days. It's important to review your direction, like what you're doing, why you're doing it, and do it. For me, I do partial on a weekly basis. I also do it on a monthly basis. Like I will, when a month is finished, I have a reminder set for me to look through what I did this month, what I accomplished, and what I did. I want to have an idea of like what's actually happening in my life, what I'm making happen in my life, or what I'm like working towards. So it's I heard it from other people, but it also came from internal desire to guarantee certain outcomes. When I'm quite persistent and I want certain things to happen in my life, a year from now, 5 years from now, and so on. And Sunday is like one of the tools I use. What I do on Sunday is one of the tools I use to create more guarantees. Sort of like an insurance in a way.
Yeah. So I think that something like that, a lot of people would find value in. So have you ever, do you find that it's differs based on the person, the type of routine? Like, do you feel like you could apply your Sunday routine to someone else's life and it will benefit them just as much as it benefits you? Or do you think it's very individual based?
I think everybody could benefit from it because if you think about it, life itself is a project, and there's great project managers and there's the ones who aren't so great. What makes them what makes a good manager different from a bad manager is that it's the systems they use. Many people don't use systems. Some people believe that they're not a systems person. That's not how they think. But it doesn't matter how you think because life itself requires some structure. It doesn't have to be complete. Like an artist, often artists, they derive most inspiration and progress by not having structure and running freely. But in order to have the privilege to have like hours of time to run freely, you need to get certain things done first, like guaranteeing that you're eating, you can have a good sleep, that your taxes are paid, that your bills are paid, that if you have any pets, that the pets are fed, your plants are watered. Like those little things, they sound really simple, but like they take time. And some people, it's really funny because we don't have a system. Like what happens is you actually end up spending more time on those tasks because you're being less efficient. So things start to accumulate, bad outcomes start to accumulate. People usually just avoid. But what happens over time is bad outcomes start to accumulate. So at some point, you're going to face like a period of time where you're gonna have to put in like 2-3 times more time and effort and mental resources into like getting something out of your way, because it's accumulated to like a huge snowball, right? So that's one of the reasons like I have systems is because early on I learned that it works better if you peel something slowly versus having to do it later all at once. Just creates more room to breathe.
And with the like, it's impressive how you've stayed dedicated to creating the system for yourself and maintaining that to a point where you're able to see the outcomes of going through that extra, or like, it's not even extra effort, it's just effort beforehand, which is hard to maintain. So how do you find the motivation to maintain this structure that you have going on?
What I've done since like a younger age is run these like mental simulations. If I do this, what's gonna happen? How am I gonna feel? What are the outcomes? So the reason I'm consistent, I've been consistent for the most part, has to do with the fact that I play these mental scenarios in my head of different pathways and outcomes, and this made the most sense. You know, one of the reasons people are not consistent is because it takes effort. So they try to avoid effort. The difference between being consistent with and being somewhat organized every day versus not is that by being consistent every day, you're putting in a bit of effort on a daily basis, versus the other way, you're not putting any effort on many days, but on other days, you're putting in a ton of effort. And to me, like, it just makes more sense to do bits every day.
Yeah.
But it's also like at the end of the day, if you want to guarantee a specific lifestyle for yourself, like specific outcomes, you do have to move towards on a daily basis. Because think about it this way: if you are not moving in that direction, that means you're moving in another direction. It's pretty simple.
Because we're always moving.
We're always being influenced. We're
Yeah.
always being influenced, and we're always doing something that's going to lead us to some type of outcome.
And what do you find is the best way for you to structure your path? So do you have a direction that you follow, or do you have a destination you want to reach?
I guess it's a mix of both. It's a mix of both. But I try not to look too far ahead right now, specifically because being in my 20s, I look at 20s as the decade to experiment and take risks and try things that might not work. I try not to pursue I try not to pursue overly defined outcomes. There's things that I would like to have. You know, I would like to get good enough at working on apps that, you know, I can like afford anything I want. You know, there's like, I want to like take an app and scale to $1 million a year. Like, that would be crazy. That would be pretty cool. But I try not to get too focused on the outcome, because what happens if you do that, then like you're missing out. You might miss out on other things. For now it's direction, but I think in my 30s I'll be more outcome driven. Like, I'll be focused on like very specific outcomes. I have standards, does that make sense? Like, I look at it as like performance targets. I just try to get to the next step versus looking up being like, oh, I want to be all the way there, because, you know, that can be quite stressful, because sometimes you are a lot further from where you want to be than you think, and then not being there can discourage you, and actually some people will quit because they didn't get whatever they wanted as quickly as they wanted to. And when reality, like what they should have like realized is that, oh, I'm actually this far away. How do I get an inch closer? How do I get an inch closer? So try to focus on those inches.
And what's your end goal? Like, do you enjoy the process, and would do you feel like that's something that you
Uh,
would pursue the rest of your life, or do you feel like you would get to a point where then you could eventually settle and retire, whatever it happens to be?
um, I think humans, there's that idea of the hierarchy of like your needs. At
Mm-hmm.
the top you have self realization. I think self realization has to do with creativity.
Uh-huh.
And with that being said, I don't think I'll ever like stop working. The way I look at it is, for me, for example, initially, for example, like, I know how to make money. Like, I've done it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, not in the I can't say like in the most passionate, uh, with the most passion type of work.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wasn't the most passionate about the work I was doing when I was making like really good money, when I could control my income quite easily.
Mm-hmm.
But like that was the first pillars. Like, can you prove to yourself that, like, can you pick up a skill and earn, a good amount, like above average amount of money with it?
Mm-hmm.
Done that. The next part is like, now can I make money doing something that fulfills my like my desires? For example, I would like to earn the base of my income that takes care of all my needs
Mm-hmm.
and desires on the internet,
Mm-hmm.
so that I can have freedom of location, so I can choose where I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the next step, right?
Yeah.
It's like once like that's accomplished, then it's like, oh, okay, so financially, like I'm really good now. I'm not just taking care of myself, I can take care of like a family now.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's move on to projects that are higher risk
Mm-hmm.
but have the potential to produce more value.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, like right now the project I'm working on is bringing in value. It's helping people find jobs around the world. um, but there's things I could work on that have even a bigger impact,
Mm-hmm.
but that's too early for me.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta complete one thing at a time.
Mm-hmm. This has been really fascinating so far.
Yeah.
I love this. Here, we're gonna do a quick intermission, and we'll be right back. I just gotta reset the camera here. We're back after that quick intermission. Just had to reset the camera, but we're gonna get right back into the conversation. So, where do you find that you've gained this structural? It's almost like a lifestyle.
Mhm.
Where would you say that you picked that up from? Is it just the people that you've met along the way? Is it from family?
Mm. I mean, there's also, there's definitely some like genetic factor there. Some, right?
Yeah.
I haven't always been like super structured. Where it really started for me was the first stage was, I think, at the end of high school, when I started to really question like what I want out of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to question things, and as a result I started to be more intentional.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I was in university, I was doing quite a bit at once, and I think I was the most challenged at the time. Like I had 5 classes I was taking. I was trying to work on a couple projects and do XYZ, and I started to feel like quite stressed. So I was like, okay, what do I do? Like, how could I manage this?
Mm-hmm.
And that question forced me to, it brought me to a place of like, okay, I need to structure things a little bit more. I need to create some processes,
Mm-hmm.
so that this happens on a Monday at this time, blah blah, and so that's kind of where it took off.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to benefit from it quite a bit. So as a result, I scaled my system.
Mm-hmm.
And now with everything I do, I set up little systems.
Mm-hmm.
And just an important thing to bring up, one of the reasons I have systems is so that I can have free time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want to be like running around like disorganized. I want to get my things done, move on to, like, I have my blocks of free time when I'm super creative and unstructured too.
Mm-hmm. And have you kind of realized when those times are, so you allocate certain tasks to certain times of the day? For example, like, oh, I'm most creative in the morning, so then you complete those tasks early. Have you kind of figured all of that out for yourself?
Parts, like, I'll say that early on, I mean, right now I don't have to do, like, my mind's always thinking of new ways to accomplish what I want. Like for me right now, it's about thinking of ways to advertise the website I'm working on. Even on the way here, I thought of an idea, and it's a pretty like I'm pretty excited about this one.
Yeah.
But in terms of like blocks of time, so usually early on I try and do the work that requires like the most like mental labor, and then at the end of the day, like I'll do the work that's very familiar to me, that doesn't require much thinking. For example, I have a client that I make social media posts for, and that I've done for years. I don't have to do much thinking there, so I'll do it later in the day when I'm a bit more tired. And there's like tasks that I'll leave to the very end when I'm like brain dead, like I'm so fatigued, where I'm like I'm barely doing it, but I can still do it. So I'll never do tasks like that early on. I'll never put them like in the morning.
Yeah. And how do you find that? How long did it take you to really get to a point in the structure where it almost it wasn't a hassle trying to figure everything out? Like, how long did it take you to figure out, okay, this, and now I have a structure in place that I could just execute rather than trying to build it?
Well, it's evolving. If anybody's like curious about this, where I would start is figure out what what your goals are. Based on your goals, then you start to figure out like what things could I do to accomplish these goals, and then you turn those things into projects. For example, if you want to be healthy, then it has to do with nutrition, it has to do with working out. Those are projects. If it has to do with finances, like if then you're like, well, do you want to earn your wealth as an employee, as a contractor, as a business owner? If it's an employee, what profession? If it's a business owner, you want to start to think of like what industry or what nature of work. Like, do you want to make money remotely? Do you want to do it in person, or does it not matter? Well, so then what happens is like once you get clarity on what you want to accomplish, how you want to accomplish it, building a system can be quite simple. You just ask yourself, how much time do you want to allocate towards working out a week? How much time do you want to allocate towards a job a week? And then depending on what you chose, right? And then you just schedule it. Like it's pretty simple after you define the what the what you want and how you want to get there.
Now, going back to the stress earlier, I watch a lot of self-development podcasts, all of that type of stuff. And one thing that I don't know if you know Alex Ramosi.
Yeah, I hear this name everywhere.
Yeah, he's like a big business guy, and I really like the way that he explains things, because I think he's similar to you in the way that he structures things, and he's very intentional with everything. One of the things that I thought about quite a bit was, he said stress is inevitable in life, so why not embrace it? Like something along those lines. I'm probably butchering it a little bit, but people, I think, tend to find stress as something like bad, but I think stress is just like a thing. It's not necessarily bad. So do you find that actually, what are your thoughts on that? Because I was trying to think of where I'm taking that, but I want to hear your thoughts on that.
No, it's a very interesting question. Like a concept to explore. I mean, stress and pain, like they're your natural guides, like life guides. They can give you clues to like how to improve and what to do different in your life. So yeah, first of all, stress is inevitable. I want to also say that stress is subjective. Here's what I mean by this. So we are social creatures.
Yeah.
A lot of our stress in like Western society comes from social factors. Like we don't have to. Most of us don't have to stress about where we're gonna get food or where we're gonna live. Like our base needs are covered, which means the majority of our stress, a lot of it comes from like things that are related to our social life, or that are related to social factors. certain like expectations, societal expectations, for example. Like a lot of it is mental. And what's interesting when I say it's subjective, what I mean by this is in different societies that mental stress looks different, or stress in general, because there's physical, there's mental stress. For example, when I've done quite a bit of traveling, and I noticed that, for example, here in Canada, I'm super ambitious. I'm super ambitious. It's hard for me not to be. But when I was in Brazil, and this was after like months of like being in foreign countries, I found myself reading statements that would inspire me, and I found them funny in some ways because I couldn't relate in that moment to those statements because I was living a good life. All my needs were met, all of them at that time. So then when I say stress is subject,
What do you mean by inspire you?
well, like you watch, let's say Alex Hermosi, for example.
Yeah.
And you watch him because, he is addressing some pain points in your life. I didn't, I did, and sometimes they'll address you through information or inspiration. They'll get you feeling like, oh, you could do it, and the minute before you feel like you couldn't, or now you know how. When I was in Brazil, for example, and I came across statements on the internet that previously I found valuable or inspiring, I couldn't relate. Once again, because there's no pain points that were there's those statements I was reading, those posts. There were no pain points in my life that they could solve, right, or benefit. So when I say that stress is subjective, it's interesting because when you travel enough, but travel not as a North American tourist, like an American tourist that goes into a resort, but when you actually live in various countries, which I have done, you will start to notice how the society around you in that country will start to change your standards. And as a result, the shape of your stress changes. The narrative of your stress changes. That's like one thing I found super interesting.
That's very interesting.
Like a lot of people go to, a developing country and they'll feel a sense of gratitude, like how blessed they are. And immediately all of their stress is gone in that moment. But then when they come back home, that effect is vanished. They're now stressed again by the same things.
Yeah.
So so that's an interesting concept to play with. Think about some stress that is in your life comes from the standards that you are served, like that you're exposed to in your social circle, like your country, your city. But if removed and put into a different country, like a lot of it could be gone. So I find that very fascinating. A lot of it's just mental.
Yeah.
It's like cassette. It's like a cassette player. Like they call it It's programming, right? It's just programming. But the other thing when it comes to pain, like a lot of people, they'll pursue pleasure. They will spend 95% of their time pursuing pleasure and finding and hacking their way into increasing the net amount of pleasure they experience in a given day, in a given moment, right? For me, I take in a different approach, and for me, it's facing the pain and like finding like is giving the pains in my life a lot of voice. I wanna understand like what am I afraid of? What are my hesitations? Sometimes like you wanna message someone. It could be a potential customer. It could be a potential romantic partner. It doesn't matter. But a lot of people stall. Like they know they want to take that step, take that action, but they will feel hesitant. So when I feel hesitant, I always get really curious. Because when I feel hesitant, that means there's some sort of pain point. There's some pain. There's some insecurity. There's a fear, and I wanna face it. I believe that we should face adversity. We wanna sprint at it.
Yeah.
Because we wanna resolve these things quickly.
Yeah.
Versus having them build up.
Yeah. So, from my experience as well, I find that facing adversity is also an alternative way to finding pleasure. Because by facing adversity, it could be pleasure. There's something empowering about it, and just that feeling that you get after. I feel like might even be better than pleasure. I don't know what you would define it as, but it's I guess just empowerment, which is very fascinating. How long did it take you to, um, or what are some moments that you had an adversity or like some type of conflict in your life, and do you have any techniques to overcome that? What is hesitation? Because
Hesitation.
there's like the 3-2-1 method. There's
Ah,
do it now, and I've tried them both. But I'm curious to hear what you do in those cases.
yeah. Think about it this way: any behavior is a formation of repetition.
Mm-hmm.
Any behavior, or any behavior that's, if you want a behavior to be available on demand.
Mm-hmm.
If you're playing, if you play games,
Mm-hmm.
you have different commands
Yeah.
that you can use on a player. And think about it this way: that as you in this life, just like in a when you play with when we play a game,
Mm-hmm.
and the character you play has different commands, so do you as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you want is you want to accumulate like more commands that you can hit on demand.
Mm-hmm.
To do that, the biggest thing is repetition. For example, I early on, like when I was in university, I did door-to-door sales.
Mm-hmm.
And initially that was really difficult. When my first day, I thought, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
It had caused such intense emotion, like mental stress for the first like couple hours, because I just got thrown out there, like dropped off in this random neighborhood in a
Yeah.
different city. And I took the step forward and I knocked on my first door. Didn't know the script, nothing. And I took my second, third, fourth. A year later, I knocked on 1,000 or
Yeah.
thousands, and over time, like knocked on like 10,000 or whatever, or
Mm-hmm.
even more doors. And so what happened is, like in that experience, like I had a lot of repetition.
Yeah.
So when it comes to approaching strangers, when it comes to pitching something,
Mm-hmm.
it could be myself or product or service, I'm a lot less hesitant than the average person, because I've had thousands more reps that I've done than they have done.
Mm-hmm.
So the first is to accumulate willpower and just do that first repetition, and then repeat it as frequently as possible. And if you want to do something on demand, then that means like you have to do it a bunch of times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we worked together for a little bit as well at a kiosk at HelloFresh at the mall, and it was a lot of fun. Um, one thing I really enjoy working, or one thing I really enjoy about working with you, is uh, your very carefree, just messing around with the customer. Like we would always do these, I don't know, bro, like just do random things just to get people to look. Because if you're just another salesman at the mall, like, hey, do you want to try HelloFresh or whatever, then people will just walk by and dismiss you.
Yeah.
But we would do like just random things, lay on the ground, just literally the most weird things you can imagine, and then people just look over and then they're interested because you're comfortable. So I think it is a exponential curve, because you start off, you're just kind of learning, but then once you get the grasp of the uh, technique, then you get better and you get more comfortable, which just results in better sales. Or actually, I think you can implement that in any aspect of life. And, I'm curious, from the very beginning when you're first knocking on doors,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of just did it. You didn't really. Was there a barrier you had to step over? Like I got to do this. You had to amp yourself up, or how did you do that?
Well, it's interesting. Well, I I mean at that point, like I didn't have, like, I mean, what, like I already decided I'm gonna do this for a summer. I'm already in Saskatoon. I'm already dropped off. Now I had all these like big hopes, like I have to, like it at that point, like it was pretty easy to knock. Like it didn't, I wasn't feeling, I wasn't comfortable, but I just had to do it at that point.
Yeah.
But in terms of your question, I'll answer it from a different scenario. Um, Not my first day, but maybe like my second week of knocking doors, I had this interesting realization. Because what happens when you knock doors to sell something, you face a lot of rejection early on because you're not good at it.
Yeah.
And at times you face this like really like big, like this actual mental wall where it's difficult. It becomes extremely difficult to do your like to knock on another door. Like it's crazy. Like you can't. It's like it's like this invisible paralyzing mechanism. And what
That's
I
a great
learned,
way of explaining it.
yeah, what I learned, what I noticed, and what I did that day when I first felt for the first time, because I had goals, right? Like it was commission based. I started to look at my body as like like a mechanical tool,
Mm-hmm.
and or a different way, I start to focus on the mechanics of my body versus my feelings.
Yeah.
You know, some people, and it's important to like work through your feelings and your emotions, but sometimes I found you just gotta just like move your body.
Uh-huh.
Like when people, if you want to get out of bed early and like you get stuck in your bed, instead of trying to get yourself wanting to get out of bed, sometimes just like physically move the body.
Yeah.
And so what I started doing is, even though I didn't want to knock, I knew that I'm control my physical body. I'll just knock on that door. Like I will do
Yeah.
the mechanics of, or when I was a manager and somebody didn't want to get out of my car to go to work,
Yeah.
I would, you know what I would do is I would open the door for them and say, hey, now like move your leg outside the car. And it worked. It's interesting, you know, they say motion creates emotion, or vice versa. Motion,
Motion creates emotion.
yeah, something along those lines. But
Yeah.
it's this idea that once you get moving, like your like biochemistry changes. Like
Yeah.
has actual changes. So it's one of my principles for doing is to focus on the mechanics versus the emotions that you're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been in a lot of awkward situations, like that felt really awkward for me. You know, I've done a lot of public speaking,
Mm-hmm.
and my first ever presentation that wasn't like school related.
Mm-hmm.
When I did a presentation in this high school in St. Albert, and I didn't prepare for it.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I don't know, I didn't have all this experience that I have now.
Mm-hmm.
And it was paralyzing. When I woke up, I was like, the hell am I doing? Am I actually going to go and do this? Like, it was so intense, but just went and did it, and it went amazing.
Yeah.
So I learned early on that, like, you just have to, like, step over your feelings at times
Mm-hmm.
and get over that boundary. And what happens once you do that, your feelings next time you do that thing are less intense.
Mm-hmm.
So the boundary gets smaller and smaller.
Mm-hmm. So repetition equals.
Repetition equals a behavior that you want being available to you on demand. You can just click and go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We're in a simulation.
Yeah. That's gonna be a different type of podcast. Conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very fascinating. Now, were you shy before starting sales?
To a degree, yeah.
Okay.
Growing up, I was shy. I was very shy, actually. Growing like young, when I was young, yes, big time. I was shy around brand new people, but in my circle, I wasn't. It was a little wild in my circle. I got when I moved to Canada, I naturally overcame a decent percentage of shyness,
Mm-hmm.
just going through school.
Mm-hmm.
And I took drama in high school, so by the time I did
That probably
sales, I wasn't as shy.
Yeah.
At that point, I was quite outgoing. But that was one of the reasons is I got into sales. I can't say I don't see myself as a salesperson. Like I don't identify as some people identify as with a profession.
Mm-hmm.
I don't identify with being a salesperson. But at the time, I got into sales because I did want to build social skills.
Mm-hmm. So that was the purpose of you getting into it in the first place.
That plus social and business skills. I thought, I read some articles online, and people talked about door-to-door sales being a really valuable experience, and I thought, let's do it.
Yeah. I was pretty similar to you. Like I was fairly outgoing in my friend circle, but when it came to anybody else, I was silent.
Mute.
Yeah, literally. Like I could not speak even if I wanted to. But I got into sales at the beginning mainly just because Taya, she
Uh-huh.
just told me like, yeah, like you could get this job and it pays however much an hour and you make this much commission. I was like, what the hell? That sounds insane.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, why not try it out? And I went, and it was miserable for the first couple months. Like I struggled so hard, but I have to say, it was a life changing experience.
Uh-huh.
Even just 3 4 months of doing that, I was able to come out. I wouldn't be able to do this if I didn't do sales.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to come out of my shell, get comfortable with people, really psychoanalyze too, which I find was really beneficial. Um, but when you have, do you plan to have kids one day?
Yeah. Yeah.
Would
Yeah.
you? I think you said that you would put them in door to door sales for sure, right?
Yeah, it's it's the world's changing quite a bit, so we'll see what the world's gonna look like by the time when I have kids.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe they'll have the
ever?
Neuralink.
Hmm?
Maybe they'll have the Neuralink. And they're
Yeah,
ready to,
I mean, you never know. Maybe it could be like an automatic like pay for upgrade.
yeah.
But I did want to comment on like something you said. So my perspective on sales and what's valuable, what's not valuable has changed quite a bit over the years. More so in the last year and two. So I look at door-to-door sales as an amazing tool to train yourself to accomplish what you want in social setting. It could be expressing yourself to like to people generally. It could be at work during a presentation when there's people bring up their points, being able to bring up yours and influence the conversation. Like so, door-to-door sales is an amazing tool, a training ground for some of these life skills. I don't think it's like the only or like the best thing any person could do is do sales. Like I think that learning how data works and like making decisions, like there's systems for making decisions, like that's a really valuable. There's so many different valuable skills, so I don't look at sales like the best anymore. I look at it as like one of the most valuable. That makes sense.
Yeah. Now, on that note, we're coming to a close here, but what if you had one action, I guess, one thing for someone that's younger to do to maximize self growth, what would that be? Just like whether it be moving to a different, like you said, you went sales out in a different city, so you had to do it. What would be one action that they could take within the next week that could really maximize self growth?
I see the biggest thing is, the interesting thing is, no matter in every field of work, in every industry, in every company, there's a top performer. There's always everybody doing above average. There's always everybody who's an all-star, like who's doing great. The big thing to do early on is to start asking yourself, what kind of lifestyle, like life, do you want for yourself? So that you can then work backwards and start to match the different professions, different cities, different maybe business models that will match that lifestyle that you want. Because there's certain cities, for example, that are specialized in certain things. Like there's certain cities that are the best places for fashion. There's certain cities that are best for technology, like hardware. If it's software, then it doesn't matter where you are realistically. I mean, it depends, but generally it doesn't matter much anymore. If you're into like arts, if you're into dance, like different countries, different cities offer cultures, social programs that are better fit for lifestyle X or Y. So that's my biggest, I would say, is my reflection point to share with people who are younger, is to ask yourself a lot of questions about what kind of life do you want to live. But I'm trying to think of specific questions that would be good to ask. So you want to identify like what you like and don't like, foundation, like generally speaking. You wanna figure out like what kind of work environments do you like. Do I like to work remotely, or do you want to be around people and interact with them a bunch? Do you like working in a team or alone? Are you the type that's They say that the people who are the worst employees make good entrepreneurs, and vice versa. You want to start to figure out like where are you on that scale. Like employees can make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So can entrepreneurs. There's entrepreneurs making pennies. There are employees making pennies. Instead of thinking about employer versus business, like think about, once again, like your lifestyle and match it that way. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, that's been episode 9 of Enlighten the Youth. I don't know. We always have great conversations, but I definitely learned some more about Roman today, and yeah, I have nothing else to say. Do you just want to like closing statement before we head out here?
I mean, if anybody has any more questions, best place to reach out to me with questions about things like this is LinkedIn.
So, you want to say your LinkedIn username?
Yeah, I can share that.
Yeah, you could share it with me. I'll put it up on screen.
Or if people just search up like my first last name,
Yeah.
then they will be able to just search me up. Pretty sure there's only like one Roman with my last name. It's
perfect.
Very, very odd.
Very unique.
Spelled, oddly spelled last name.
Yeah.
In English.
I don't even know if I remember how to spell it, but that's been episode 9. Check out Roman's LinkedIn. Check out Career Hound, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Thank you, guys.
All right, good.
Good shit, man.